They walked away when the pressure got heavy. They turned their backs when your tears became inconvenient. They left when you needed them the most. But hear me today. God never left your side. When friends vanished, His presence stayed. When doors slammed shut, heaven stood open. When you felt abandoned, rejected, and forgotten, God was still standing right there, holding you together when you were falling apart. This is not the story of who left you. This is the revelation of who stayed. And if you can catch this word today, you'll understand that what walked away was a loss, but what stayed with you was your destiny. There are moments in life when silence becomes louder than noise, when the absence of people you once depended on speaks more powerfully than any words they ever said. You look around and realize the seats are empty, the phones are quiet, the messages have stopped coming. What once felt like a crowd now feels like a wilderness. And in that lonely place, the enemy loves to whisper that you have been forgotten, abandoned, and left to fend for yourself. But the truth that must rise above every emotion, every memory, and every painful experience is this: God's presence is constant even when people leave. People are seasonal. They enter your life with promises, passion, and presence, but not everyone is assigned to stay forever. Some walk with you only as long as it benefits them, as long as the journey is comfortable, or as long as the road is familiar. The moment the path becomes difficult, uncertain, or demanding, they begin to drift away. That departure can feel personal, like a verdict on your worth, your value, or your destiny, but God never measures you by who stayed or who left. He measures you by His purpose, and His purpose does not expire because people change their minds. When people leave, it hurts because we are relational beings. We were created to connect, to love, to walk together. Separation wounds the heart, especially when it comes without explanation or closure. Yet, even in that wound, there is a divine truth working beneath the surface. God does not leave with them. His presence is not attached to human loyalty. He does not pack up and walk out when others decide you are too much, too slow, too broken, or too different. While human love can be conditional, God's presence is unwavering. Scripture reminds us again and again that God remains when others disappear. When Hagar was cast out into the wilderness with her child, rejected and dismissed, God met her there and revealed Himself as the God who sees. When Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and forgotten in prison, the Bible repeatedly says, "But the Lord was with Joseph, not after he got promoted, not when the dream made sense, but in the pit, in the prison, in the process." God did not wait for better circumstances to show up. He was already there. Sometimes we expect God's presence to feel loud, dramatic, or emotional. We want a sign, a voice, a sudden change. But often His presence is quiet strength that keeps you breathing when you thought you couldn't go on. It is peace that doesn't make sense, endurance that defies logic, and hope that refuses to die. When people leave, God doesn't always replace them immediately. Instead, He reveals Himself more deeply. He becomes the friend you talk to in the midnight hour, the comfort you feel when tears fall without warning, the stability that holds you steady when everything else feels unstable. There are seasons when God intentionally allows people to leave so you can discover that He is enough. Not because relationships don't matter, but because dependence must be rightly placed. When your confidence is tied too tightly to people, their absence can shatter you. But when your confidence is rooted in God's presence, even abandonment cannot destroy you. God is not trying to isolate you to punish you. He is drawing you closer to refine you. In the quiet, He speaks. In the emptiness, He fills. In the loss, He reveals. It is easy to mistake solitude for abandonment, but solitude is often the workshop of God. It is in those lonely moments that He reshapes your character, heals your wounds, and strengthens your spirit. When there is no one else to lean on, you learn how to lean on Him. When there is no applause, you learn how to obey without validation. When no one is watching, your faith matures. People leaving may have broken your heart, but God staying is what preserves your soul. God's presence does not mean the pain disappears instantly. The tears may still fall. The memories may still ache. The questions may still surface. But there is a holy difference between hurting alone and hurting with God. When God is with you, pain does not have the final word. Sorrow does not get the last sentence. You are never truly alone, even when it feels that way. His presence wraps around your broken places and keeps you from collapsing under the weight of disappointment. What people leave behind, God often uses to push you forward. The absence creates space. Space for growth, space for clarity, space for God to do what people could not do. When others walk away, God often steps closer, not because He is compensating, but because He is positioning. He wants you to know that your survival, your success, and your destiny were never dependent on human presence. They were always sustained by divine presence. Many people can testify that the seasons when they felt most alone were the seasons when God was doing His deepest work. Those were the moments when faith became personal, not inherited. When prayer became a lifeline, not a ritual. When worship became a refuge, not a performance. People leaving stripped away distractions and revealed what truly mattered. And in that revelation, God proved Himself faithful. God's presence is not fragile. It does not fade with rejection or disappear with betrayal. He does not love you less because others couldn't stay. He does not distance Himself because you are hurting. In fact, the Bible says He is close to the brokenhearted. When your heart feels shattered by abandonment, that is when He draws nearest. He stands with you in the fire, walks with you through the valley, and sits with you in the tears. If people walked away, it does not mean God is finished with you. It means He is still with you, shaping you for what's ahead. What left you may have been familiar, but what stays with you is eternal. God's presence carries wisdom, strength, and direction that no human relationship can replace. And as long as He is with you, you are never without hope. One day, you will look back and realize that the loss did not destroy you. The loneliness did not consume you. The abandonment did not end you. God's presence sustained you, carried you, and brought you through. And when you stand on the other side stronger, wiser, and more rooted than ever, you will know this truth in your spirit. People may leave, but God never does. There are moments when rejection cuts so deeply that it feels like a personal sentence has been passed over your life. Doors close without explanation, relationships end without warning, opportunities disappear just when you thought they were secure. You replay conversations in your mind, wondering what you did wrong, what you could have said differently, or how you could have been more acceptable. Rejection has a way of making you question your worth, your calling, and even your faith. But there is a higher truth that rises above the sting of being turned away. Rejection is often redirection by God. We tend to see rejection as an ending, but God often uses it as a turning point. What looks like denial from people may actually be divine protection. God sees what you cannot see. He understands the intentions behind closed doors, the motives behind smiling faces, and the dangers hidden behind attractive opportunities. When God allows rejection, it is not because you are unqualified, it is often because you are too valuable to be misplaced. He is guiding you away from what would limit you, delay you, or ultimately harm the purpose He placed inside you. Many times, rejection comes from places we expected acceptance. That is what makes it hurt so deeply. You trusted them, you believed in the relationship, you invested time, love, and loyalty. When rejection comes from familiar hands, it wounds the heart in a way strangers never could. Yet even in that pain, God is working. He is separating you from environments that cannot sustain your growth. He is removing you from rooms where your destiny would be minimized and redirecting you towards spaces where your calling can breathe. The Bible is filled with stories of people who experienced rejection before stepping into redirection. David was overlooked by his own father when the prophet came to anoint a king. Jesse did not even consider him worthy of being called into the room, yet that rejection did not disqualify David, it positioned him. While others were celebrated, David was being prepared. God redirected him from the field to the throne, not in a straight line, but through a process that required rejection to shape his humility and strength. Rejection has a way of exposing where our identity truly rests. If your value is rooted in people's approval, rejection will devastate you. But if your identity is anchored in God's calling, rejection becomes information, not condemnation. It reveals where you do not belong. It shows you where your assignment is not aligned. God never rejects you to destroy you. He redirects you to develop you. What feels like loss is often God removing what is familiar so you can embrace what is fruitful. Sometimes God uses rejection to save you from becoming comfortable in the wrong place. Comfort can be dangerous when it keeps you from growth. You might have stayed in that relationship, that job, that environment, slowly shrinking, slowly compromising, slowly settling. Rejection interrupts complacency. It forces movement. It pushes you to seek God, reevaluate your direction, and step into something new. The pain becomes the catalyst for purpose. It is important to understand that not every closed door is the enemy. Some closed doors are God's mercy. You prayed for opportunity, but God closed it because He saw the pressure it would bring. You asked for connection, but God blocked it because He saw the manipulation it would produce. You wanted acceptance, but God allowed rejection because He knew that staying would cost you your peace, your integrity, or your calling. Redirection is often disguised as disappointment. Rejection also teaches discernment. It sharpens your spiritual awareness. After being rejected, you begin to see more clearly. You recognize patterns you ignored before. You hear God's voice with greater sensitivity. You stop chasing validation and start pursuing purpose. What once distracted you loses its power. What once hurt you begins to instruct you. God uses rejection to mature you, to strip away the need for constant affirmation, and to anchor you deeper in Him. There are seasons when rejection feels repetitive, like a cycle you cannot escape. You begin to wonder if something is wrong with you. But sometimes repeated rejection means you are trying to enter a door that was never meant for you. God's redirection does not always come with a map. Sometimes it comes with resistance. Each no pushes you closer to the right yes. Each closed door refines your patience, your character, and your dependence on God. Jesus Himself experienced rejection. He was rejected by religious leaders, misunderstood by followers, and even denied by those closest to Him. Yet every rejection moved Him closer to the fulfillment of His mission. If He had been accepted by everyone, the cross would have never happened and redemption would have never been released. Rejection did not stop the plan of God, it fulfilled it. That same principle applies to your life. God can use rejection as a necessary step toward what He has ordained. Redirection does not mean the journey becomes easier immediately. Often it means stepping into uncertainty. You leave what you knew without fully understanding where you are going. That requires faith, but faith grows when you trust God beyond human acceptance. Redirection invites you to follow God's voice instead of people's opinions. It teaches you to move even when affirmation is absent. One day, you will realize that what rejected you could not handle where God was taking you. The level of responsibility, growth, and impact ahead required separation. God was protecting both you and them. What felt like being pushed away was actually being pulled forward by God's hand. The rejection did not remove you from God's plan, it removed what was in the way of it. Healing from rejection takes time, but understanding redirection brings peace. You stop asking, "Why wasn't I enough?" and start declaring, "God is leading me somewhere better." The pain becomes part of your testimony. The rejection becomes a marker not of failure, but of transition. God closes one chapter so He can author another. In time, you will see that rejection did not ruin your life, it redirected it. It aligned you with God's timing, God's people, and God's purpose. And when you finally step into the place prepared for you, you will thank God for the doors that did not open, the hands that let go, and the paths that ended. Because without those rejections, you might have never found the direction that led you into destiny. There comes a point in life when you have to be honest enough to admit that some of what you lost was never meant to go with you where God is taking you. It hurts to say it, because we become emotionally attached to people, places, and patterns. We invest memories, effort, and loyalty, and when those things walk away, it feels like part of us is being torn loose. But there is a deeper spiritual reality at work, one that can transform your pain into peace if you are willing to see it. What walked away could not go where God is taking you. God is a God of progression. He moves us from glory to glory, from faith to faith, from one level of understanding to another. Every level comes with new responsibilities, new demands, and new requirements. Not everyone is equipped, willing, or prepared to make that journey with you. Some people love the version of you that stays small, predictable, and manageable. But when God begins to stretch you, challenge you, and elevate you, their comfort with you begins to fade. Their departure is not always about conflict. Sometimes it is about capacity. There are people who can celebrate you at one stage, but cannot support you at the next. They were comfortable with you dreaming quietly, but they become uneasy when those dreams begin to demand action. They encouraged you when your faith was private, but they resist when your obedience becomes public. As God calls you higher, the atmosphere around you must change. What walked away often lacked the spiritual, emotional, or mental strength to survive the next level. God did not remove them out of cruelty. He allowed the separation out of necessity. We often pray for growth without considering the cost of growth. Elevation requires separation. In Scripture, whenever God prepared to do something new, He called someone out of something old. Abraham had to leave his father's house. Moses had to leave the palace. Ruth had to leave her homeland. Jesus called his disciples to leave their nets. The leaving was painful, but it was purposeful. What they left behind could not accompany them into what God had prepared. Sometimes what walks away is not a person but a mindset. Old habits, familiar patterns, and comfortable routines begin to fall apart as God calls you into something greater. You may find that what once satisfied you no longer fulfills you. Conversations feel shallow. Environments feel restrictive. Dreams begin to disturb your rest. That is not confusion. That is transition. God is loosening your grip on what cannot sustain your future. It is natural to grieve what walked away. God does not ask you to deny the pain. Even Jesus wept at the tomb of Lazarus, though he knew resurrection was coming. Grief does not mean you are weak. It means you love deeply, but grief must not turn into guilt. Do not blame yourself for outgrowing spaces God never intended to be permanent. Growth is not betrayal. Obedience is not abandonment. You are not wrong for responding to God's call, even if it costs you relationships you once cherished. There are moments when you try to carry people into your next season, but they resist the weight of it. They question your decisions, doubt your direction, and criticize your obedience. Their resistance becomes a burden that slows you down. God, in His wisdom, allows distance to form so you can move freely. What walked away was not punished, it was released. God knows that dragging what does not fit into the future can damage both you and them. Often, we romanticize the past because it feels safer than the unknown. What walked away represents familiarity, history, and comfort. But comfort is not the same as calling. God is more concerned with your destiny than your nostalgia. If something cannot survive in the environment of your next assignment, it cannot go with you. God will not compromise the future He prepared just to preserve the feelings of the present. Joseph's life illustrates this truth powerfully. His brothers could not go with him into the palace. Their jealousy, immaturity, and resentment were incompatible with the leadership God was developing in him. The separation was painful and unjust, but it was necessary. Had they remained close, Joseph's calling would have been strangled before it ever matured. What walked away was not fit for where God was taking him. Sometimes the separation is temporary, and sometimes it is permanent. Either way, it serves a purpose. Some people leave to grow on their own path. Others leave because their assignment in your life is complete. Not everyone who starts with you is meant to finish with you. That does not diminish the value of what you shared. It simply honors the reality of change. God works in seasons, and seasons shift whether we are ready or not. Trying to hold on to what has walked away can create unnecessary pain. You exhaust yourself replaying conversations, forcing connections, and reopening wounds God is trying to heal. But when you trust that God allowed the separation, peace begins to replace anxiety. You stop asking why they left and start asking where God is leading. You stop mourning what you lost and start preparing for what is coming. What walked away made room for what is ahead. God often removes before He adds. He clears space before He fills it. The emptiness you feel is not a void, it is capacity. God is creating room for new relationships, deeper faith, and greater purpose. What is coming requires room to breathe, to grow, and to flourish. One day, you will look back and realize that if they had stayed, you might have stayed stuck. If they had remained, you might have never stepped out. Their departure forced your dependence on God and unlocked strength you did not know you possessed. What walked away could not go where God was taking you, but what stayed with you, your faith. Your calling, your obedience was enough. God never asks you to move forward empty-handed. He goes with you. His presence accompanies you into every new level. When you trust Him, the pain of separation turns into the power of transformation. And when you finally arrive where God has been leading you all along, you will understand that the loss was not punishment, it was preparation. There are seasons in life when the crowd thins out and the noise fades, leaving you standing in a quiet space you never expected to enter. The phone stops ringing. Invitations slow down. Familiar voices are no longer around to affirm your decisions or comfort your fears. Isolation settles in, not because you chose it, but because circumstances led you there. In those moments, it is easy to assume that isolation means abandonment, but in God's economy, isolation is often the very place where He sustains you most powerfully. Isolation strips life down to its essentials. When people are present, we often draw strength from their encouragement, advice, and validation. There is nothing wrong with that, but there are times when God removes those external supports so you can discover an internal strength rooted in Him. When you are isolated, you learn what truly sustains you. You learn what remains when everything else is taken away. And again, what remains is God's faithfulness. Many of God's greatest servants were sustained in isolation before they were revealed in public. Moses spent years on the backside of the desert, far from the palace and far from the people he would one day lead. David spent lonely nights tending sheep unseen and uncelebrated. Elijah hid by the brook, dependent on God for daily provision. Paul spent years in obscurity before stepping fully into his apostolic calling. Isolation was not a detour, it was preparation. God sustained them in private before He used them in public. Isolation has a way of confronting your fears. Without distractions, unresolved pain surfaces. Doubts you avoided must now be faced. Questions you suppressed begin to rise. Yet God does not leave you alone with those fears. He meets you in them. His presence becomes more personal, more intimate, more real. In isolation, prayer changes. It is no longer polished or performative. It becomes honest, raw, and desperate. And that kind of prayer draws you closer to the heart of God. God sustains you in isolation by becoming what others once were to you. If you lost companionship, He becomes your comfort. If you lost guidance, He becomes your counselor. If you lost affirmation, He reminds you of who you are in Him. This does not mean people are unnecessary. It means God is sufficient. He proves that your survival does not depend on constant human interaction, but on divine connection. Isolation also reveals how deeply God knows you. When no one else sees the tears you cry or the battles you fight, God does. When no one understands the weight you carry, God does. He is not distant in your solitude. He is attentive. Scripture says He numbers the hairs on your head and collects your tears. That level of care does not disappear just because people do. In fact, isolation often heightens your awareness of His nearness. There is a temptation in isolation to rush back into connection just to avoid loneliness. But God sometimes allows isolation to protect you from unhealthy attachments. When you are vulnerable, you can settle for relationships that soothe your loneliness but sabotage your purpose. God sustains you by keeping you hidden until you are strong enough to connect without compromising who He is shaping you to be. Isolation is not rejection, it is protection. In isolation, God rebuilds your identity. When people are around, it is easy to define yourself by roles, expectations, and opinions. When those voices are removed, you are forced to ask, "Who am I when no one is watching?" God answers that question by reminding you that you are His. Your worth is not tied to productivity, popularity, or performance. It is rooted in His love. That revelation brings healing to places that applause never could. Isolation teaches obedience without witnesses. You learn to do the right thing even when no one is there to applaud you. You learn to worship without a choir, to pray without an audience, to trust without reassurance. This kind of faith is strong because it is sincere. God sustains you by strengthening your spiritual foundation so that when people return, your faith does not crumble under pressure. There are days in isolation when you feel tired, discouraged, and unseen. Sustaining does not mean the absence of struggle, it means the presence of grace. God gives you daily strength, not all at once, but moment by moment. He feeds you like he fed Israel with manna, just enough for today. That daily dependence keeps you connected to him. You learn to trust him for what you need now instead of worrying about what comes next. Isolation also sharpens your spiritual hearing. When external voices quiet down, God's voice becomes clearer. You begin to discern his leading more easily. You recognize when he is nudging you to let go, to move forward, or to wait. Sustained isolation produces spiritual clarity. You stop chasing every opportunity and start following divine direction. It is important to understand that isolation is seasonal. God does not intend for you to live disconnected forever. He uses isolation to heal, refine, and prepare you. Then he reintroduces you to community with greater wisdom and discernment. The difference is that when you emerge, you are no longer dependent on people for your identity or security. You are sustained by God first, and relationships become a complement, not a crutch. If you are in a season of isolation now, it does not mean you are forgotten. It means God is close. He is doing work in you that could not be done in the noise. He is strengthening your inner life, healing old wounds, and preparing you for deeper connections ahead. What feels empty now will one day feel purposeful in hindsight. God sustains you in isolation so that when you step back into the world, you are whole, grounded, and secure. You will love without losing yourself. You will serve without burning out. You will stand without needing constant support. Isolation did not weaken you, it strengthened you. And when this season passes, you will know with confidence that even when you stood alone, you were never without God. There is a dangerous lie that quietly settles into the heart when people walk away, doors close, and support disappears. That lie says your future is fragile because it depended on who stayed. It tells you that without certain people, certain platforms, or certain connections, your destiny is now delayed or destroyed. But the truth that must anchor your soul is this: your destiny is secured by God, not people. People can influence your journey, but they do not control your assignment. They may open doors, but they are not the source of the calling on your life. God placed purpose inside you before anyone ever noticed you. Long before applause, approval, or association, God already decided what he would do with your life. Destiny does not begin with people, and it does not end with people. It begins and ends with God. When people leave, it often feels like your future left with them. You may think, they were my connection. They believed in me. They gave me access. And yes, God may have used them for a season, but never confuse the instrument with the source. God can use people, but he is not limited by them. If he allowed them to leave, it is because your destiny was never tied to their presence. What God ordains, he sustains. Scripture shows us again and again that God secures destiny in unlikely circumstances, often without the support people assume is necessary. Joseph's destiny did not depend on his father's protection or his brother's approval. In fact, his destiny unfolded through betrayal, isolation, and imprisonment. What looked like setbacks were actually setups. Even when people tried to sabotage him, God's plan kept moving forward. That is what it means for destiny to be secured by God. When destiny is secured by people, fear controls you. You become afraid to speak honestly, afraid to obey fully, afraid to grow beyond their comfort. You start shrinking to stay connected. But when destiny is secured by God, freedom follows. You can obey even when it costs you relationships. You can grow even when others feel threatened. You can move forward without permission because God already authorized your calling. One of the hardest lessons to learn is that some people cannot go with you because they would try to take credit for what only God should receive glory for. If your destiny were fulfilled through human strength alone, it would be easy to forget God's role. But when God secures your destiny, he ensures that no one can claim ownership over your testimony. When you finally arrive, it will be clear that it was the Lord who brought you there. God secures destiny not by eliminating opposition, but by overruling it. People may misunderstand you, mislabel you, or mistreat you, but none of that has the power to cancel what God has spoken. Human rejection cannot override divine election. People may vote you out, but God has already chosen you. And what God chooses, He protects. There are seasons when God intentionally strips away human support so you can see how secure your destiny really is. He allows the shaking so that only what is unshakable remains. When people leave and you are still standing, still believing, still moving forward, you begin to realize that something stronger than human support is holding you up. That strength is the hand of God. Your destiny is not fragile. It does not collapse because someone stopped believing in you. It does not disappear because a door closed. It does not expire because you were overlooked. If God promised it, He will perform it. Time cannot cancel it. Delay cannot destroy it. Betrayal cannot derail it. God watches over His word to fulfill it. It is also important to understand that God secures destiny through process, not shortcuts. People often want quick access, instant recognition, and visible success. But God is more concerned with who you are becoming than how fast you arrive. When people leave, the process often deepens. You are forced to rely on God's wisdom instead of human advice. You develop character instead of charisma. You gain endurance instead of applause. All of this strengthens your ability to carry what God has planned. When destiny is secured by God, comparison loses its power. You stop measuring your progress against others because you understand that your path is unique. What God is doing and you cannot be rushed or replicated. You may arrive later than others, but you will arrive prepared. People may get ahead temporarily, but only God can take you where you truly belong. There will be moments when you feel like nothing is happening, like you are stuck while others move forward. But silence does not mean stagnation. God often does His deepest work underground. Roots grow before fruit appears. Destiny matures in hidden places before it manifests in visible ways. Because God secures destiny, even unseen seasons are productive. When you finally step into what God promised, you will realize that losing certain people was not a loss at all. It was alignment. God was removing voices that would have distorted your confidence and relationships that would have diluted your focus. What felt like subtraction was actually protection. God was guarding your destiny from interference. You do not have to fight to prove yourself to anyone. You do not have to beg for validation. You do not have to chase platforms or connections. When God secures destiny, He also handles timing, positioning, and exposure. At the right moment, He will bring you before the right people, in the right place, for the right purpose. And when that happens, no one will be able to deny that it was God. Rest in this truth: your life is not hanging by the thread of human approval. It is held firmly in the hands of God. People may walk away, but destiny does not walk away with them. God stays, God leads, God fulfills. And what He has spoken over your life will come to pass, not because people supported you, but because God secured you. As we bring this word to a close, remember this: what you experienced was not abandonment, it was alignment. People walked away, doors closed, seasons ended, but through it all, God never moved. He stayed when others left. He sustained you when the silence grew loud. He redirected you when rejection tried to define you. He separated you from what could not go with you. And He secured your destiny when it felt like everything was slipping away. You may have lost people, but you did not lose purpose. You may have felt alone, but you were never forsaken. You may have been rejected, but you were never disqualified. Every tear you cried watered the ground of your growth. Every lonely night strengthened your faith. Every closed door sharpened your discernment. What felt like the breaking of your heart was actually the building of your character. God was working in ways you could not see, shaping you for what is ahead. Stop measuring your future by who stayed. Stop questioning your worth because someone walked away. God's presence has been with you in the fire, in the valley, in the waiting, and in the pain. And if God is with you, then you are still standing, still called, still chosen, still moving forward. What walked away could not carry the weight of where God is taking you. What stayed with you? Your faith, your obedience, your endurance is enough. The same God who kept you through the loss will lead you into the promise. The same God who sustained you in isolation will reveal you in due season. Lift your head, steady your heart, strengthen your faith. This was not the end of your story. This was the turning point. God never left your side, and because of that, your best is still ahead.